My name is Marcus Washington. I'm 72 years old, a retired structural engineer, and I've spent my whole life right here in Memphis, Tennessee, the heart of the Delta. What I'm about to share with you today is the most devastating story I've ever had to live through. This is about shattered trust, a brotherhood that turned into betrayal, and a discovery that tore apart everything I thought was solid in my world. I lived more than 4 decades believing a lie. And the cruelest part? I found out through a DNA test that not one of my 4 children was actually mine. All 4 of them shared the same biological father, and that man had been my best friend since we were kids running these same streets. If you've ever been through a betrayal or discovered that somebody you trusted with your life deceived you for years, hit that like button for this old man's heart. Subscribe to this channel right now so you won't miss the stories I'm going to keep sharing with all my soul. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Has anybody you loved ever broken your trust like this? I love knowing what cities y'all are tuning in from and what time of day you're joining me. I was born in Memphis back when the neighborhood was tight-knit and everybody looked out for each other. My daddy was a brick mason and my mama worked as a seamstress, taking in alterations and making clothes for folks in the community. We lived in a modest house near the AIM Church on the corner. I remember the smell of fresh-perked coffee every morning, those hot buttermilk biscuits Mama would pull from the oven, and Sunday dinners after service when the whole family would gather around the table for her famous fried chicken, collard greens slow-cooked with ham hocks, and sweet potato pie that made you want to slap somebody. It was a simple life, but it was real. My parents taught me that a man's word is his bond, that true friendship is sacred, and that family comes before everything else. I grew up holding those values tight to my chest, believing in them with everything I had. It was when I was still just a boy that I met Deshaun Mitchell. He lived 4 houses down from us in a brick house with a magnolia tree out front. We met playing pickup basketball in the street. I was about 8 years old, and so was he. We became inseparable after that. We played ball in the park until the streetlights came on, went fishing down by the river at dawn, studied together at the kitchen table, and split sandwiches at lunchtime when one of us came up short. Deshaun was like a brother to me, closer than blood. When one of us had trouble, the other one stepped up. When one of us hurt, the other felt it too. I trusted that man more than anybody in this world, except my own parents. If somebody had told me back then that one day this same brother would betray me in the worst way a man can be betrayed, I would have laughed right in their face. But life has a way of showing you cruel truths when it's already too late to do anything about it. Growing up, I was always the studious one. My daddy used to say I had a natural gift for building things, that I could look at blueprints and see the finished structure in my mind. He wanted me to go further than he ever could, to reach heights he never got the chance to climb. So I buckled down with my schoolwork, stayed focused, passed those entrance exams, and went off to study structural engineering at a college in the area. It was a huge source of pride for my family. My daddy cried the day I graduated, said he'd fulfilled his purpose on this earth. Deshaun was right there in the crowd too, clapping and hollering for me, proud as hell of his best friend. We stayed tight even though I'd taken a different path than he did. He bounced around different jobs, mostly in sales and retail. Never could seem to stay put in one place for long, but our friendship, that never wavered. Or at least that's what I thought at the time. After I got my degree, I started working for a big construction company. Major projects, highways, bridges, overpasses, the kind of work that put me on the road constantly. Sometimes I'd be gone for 3 weeks straight, only coming home for maybe a week and a half before heading back out again. But the money was solid, and I had plans for my future. I wanted to build a good life, establish a strong family, and provide everything my future children would need to succeed. I was young, full of dreams, burning with ambition to make something of myself. And it was right around that time that Deshaun showed up with news that would change the entire course of my life. One evening, he called me up and asked me to meet him for drinks at Willie's Lounge over on Beale Street. Something seemed different about him, like he was nervous but excited at the same time. We grabbed a booth, ordered a couple of beers, and he kept dancing around whatever he wanted to say until finally he just came out with it. He said he'd met this incredible woman through a mutual friend, a cousin of somebody he knew from work, and he thought I'd really hit it off with her too. Her name was Tamara. I had no clue in that moment, sitting there in that dim lounge with blues, music playing in the background, and the smell of barbecue drifting in from the kitchen, that this was the beginning of a trap that would last more than 40 years. But right then, naive as I was, all I could think was that my best friend was being a good brother, trying to help me find someone special. And when I met Tamara the following weekend, I was completely swept off my feet. She was gorgeous, graceful, and had this warm way of speaking that drew me in from the very first conversation. What I didn't know was that she and Deshaun already had a history together, one that I wouldn't discover for decades. Not until it was far too late to undo the damage dot. Tamara was the kind of woman who could walk into any room and command attention without even trying. It wasn't just her looks, though she was beautiful. It was her whole presence. She had this radiant smile that could light up the darkest day, a soft voice that put you at ease, and that southern charm, the kind where she'd ask if you wanted more sweet tea before your glass was even half empty. When Deshaun introduced us at a Sunday cookout after church, I felt my heart skip a beat. She was wearing a yellow sundress, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, and when she said hello, I caught the scent of her perfume, something sweet and subtle. It was love at first sight, the kind you only see in movies. We started dating and things moved fast. She told me I was different from other men she'd known, that I had a real future ahead of me, and that she admired how dedicated I was to my career. I felt like the luckiest man alive. We'd take evening walks through the neighborhood, share milkshakes at the corner diner, catch movies at the old theater downtown. On Sunday afternoons after church, we'd sit on a bench at the park and talk about the future we were going to build together. She'd talk about the children she wanted to have, the home she wanted to create, and I promised her I'd give her all of that. And I kept that promise. Lord knows I kept it. I worked myself to the bone my whole life to provide comfort and security for her and those kids. But while I was out there building bridges and highways, another man was building a family with my wife, right under my own roof. Deshaun was always around. At first, I thought nothing of it. After all, he was my best friend, and he'd been the one to introduce me to Tamara in the first place. When we went out, sometimes he'd tag along. When I invited Tamara over to my mama's house for Sunday dinner, Deshaun would show up there too. Mama would cook up a feast, smothered pork chops, red beans and rice, mac and cheese, cornbread fresh from the oven, and we'd all sit around that big table laughing and making plans for the future. Deshaun used to joke that when I got married, he was going to be my best man. And he was. But his role in Tamara's life went far deeper than just standing beside me at the altar. There's one thing I remember clear as day that should have made me suspicious. But I was too trusting, too blind to see what was right in front of me. One day, I went to pick up Tamara from her apartment to take her to a festival downtown, and Deshaun was there. They were sitting on her porch talking in low voices, and when I walked up, they both jumped like they'd been caught red-handed. Deshaun quickly made up some excuse about stopping by to drop off a message for me, said he didn't know I was already on my way. Tamara smiled and said she'd offered him some lemonade while he waited. I believed them. Of course I believed them. Why wouldn't I trust my best friend and the woman I was falling in love with? We got married just a few months after we started dating. It was a simple but beautiful ceremony at the church, with all our family and friends there to witness it. My mama cried tears of joy. My daddy gave me a bear hug and told me I'd chosen a good woman. Deshaun was my best man, just like he'd promised. At the reception, there was sweet potato pie made by Aunt Clara, plenty of soul food, and we danced until late into the night. I looked at Tamara in that simple white dress and felt like the happiest man in the world. I thought I'd found my soulmate, the mother of my future children, my partner for life. I didn't know I was marrying a woman whose heart already belonged to someone else. And that someone was my best friend standing right there beside me. Shortly after the wedding, I had to travel for a major project that was going to keep me away for nearly a month. I remember being worried about leaving Tamara alone so soon after we'd gotten married. We were still newlyweds, but she took my hands in hers, looked into my eyes with that sweet way she had, and told me not to worry. She said she understood that I had to work, that this was part of building our future together. She said she'd be fine, that her family lived nearby, and that she wouldn't want for anything. And that's when Deshaun offered to help out. He said he could check on the house every few days, make sure Tamara had everything she needed, run errands if necessary. I thanked him, deeply moved by his friendship. What luck I had, I thought, to have a brother like that looking out for my wife while I was away working. I was so foolish it hurts to think about it now. When I'd come back from those trips, the house was always spotless. Tamara always had that warm smile waiting for me and a hot meal on the table. She made the best fried catfish I'd ever tasted, with hush puppies and coleslaw on the side. There was always a fresh pot of coffee brewing just for me. I felt welcomed, loved, appreciated. I never suspected a thing. Deshaun would stop by to have a beer with me on the porch. He'd fill me in on all the neighborhood gossip, and we'd play dominoes while the sun went down. Everything seemed perfect. I had a beautiful wife, a happy marriage, a job that paid well, and a best friend who was always there for me. How blind I was, wasn't long before Tamara got pregnant with our first child. I was over the moon with joy at the thought of becoming a father. My dream of having a big, loving family was finally coming true. During her pregnancy, I tried to cut back on traveling, but the job demanded it. Every time I had to leave town, Deshaun was right there, ready to step in. He'd drive Tamara to her prenatal appointments when I couldn't make it. He'd pick up groceries for her, fix things around the house that needed repair. I thanked God for blessing me with such a loyal friend. It never once crossed my mind that he was doing all this, because the baby growing inside my wife's belly was his own flesh and blood. And there I was, the fool, paying all the bills, setting up the nursery, buying diapers and baby clothes, preparing to be a father to another man's child, when Malik was born. It was one of the happiest days of my entire life. I held that tiny baby in my arms, looked down at that precious little face, and made a promise that I was going to be the best father in the world. I swore I would work hard to give him everything he needed, a good education, a safe home, unconditional love. And I kept that promise every single day. But there's something that eats at me now when I look back. Deshaun was one of the first people to visit us at the hospital. He showed up with flowers and a gift for the baby, all smiles and congratulations. And when he held Malik in his arms, I saw something in his eyes, an emotion that seemed too powerful to be just that of a godfather. But I didn't want to see it. I refused to see what was right there in front of me. The years rolled by, and I kept traveling for work. 20 days gone, 10 days home, sometimes even longer stretches away. I'd call Tamara every single night. I'd ask how she was doing, how baby Malik was growing. She always said everything was fine, that Deshawn had helped with this or that. What a blessing it was to have such a caring friend. And I'd agree, feeling grateful for my brother. I sent money home regularly, paid all the bills on time, worked myself ragged so that nothing would be lacking for my family. Meanwhile, Deshawn was getting what I wanted most: time with my family, time in my house, time in my bed. A couple years later came our second son, Terrell. The same overwhelming joy, the same fierce love, the same promise to be the father he deserved. And once again, Deshawn was always present, always helpful, always there. Then came our daughter Jasmine, my little princess, the daughter I'd always dreamed of having. And finally came Andre, our youngest. 4 beautiful children that I loved more than life itself. I worked like a man possessed to give them everything they needed. I paid for good schools, nice clothes, doctor visits when they got sick, family vacations, everything I could provide. I was a present father when I was home, even though I was exhausted from work. I played with them, helped with their homework, took them to the park. But there was always something that bothered me deep down, a small thing I tried to push away and ignore. None of my 4 children looked like me. I'd mention it to Tamara sometimes, half joking but half serious too. I'd say it was strange how none of them had my nose, my eyes, my build, my way of moving through the world. She'd laugh it off and say they took after her side of the family. I wanted to believe that explanation because it hurt less to believe a comfortable lie than to face a truth that would destroy everything. But somewhere deep in my soul, a quiet voice kept whispering that something wasn't right. I silenced that voice for more than 40 years, and Deshawn stayed close, always available, always helping out. He knew my children better than I did, because he was there when I wasn't. He witnessed the first steps, heard the first words, was part of the daily routine. I was so proud, so grateful for having such a dedicated friend in my life. It never occurred to me that he wasn't just being a friend. He was being a father, the father of the children I believed were mine. The years kept passing, and my 4 children grew up strong. Malik was the serious one, responsible since he was small, always looking out for his younger siblings when his mama asked. Terrell was the class clown, always cracking jokes and making everyone laugh. Jasmine was my little princess, sweet and gentle, always staying close to her mother. And Andre, the youngest, was the brightest of them all, bringing home straight A's and making us so proud. I'd look at the 4 of them, and my chest would swell with happiness. I thought I'd managed to build exactly what I'd always dreamed of, a beautiful, tight-knit family full of love and laughter. But there was one detail that bothered me more and more as time went on, even though I tried to sweep that discomfort under the rug. As the boys got older, I realized that none of them had a single thing from me. Nothing at all. Malik had a different walk than mine, a different smile. Even his voice developed in a way that was nothing like my own. Terrell was already taller than me by his teenage years, with broad shoulders that didn't come from my side of the family. Jasmine had these striking eyes that weren't mine or Tamara's, at least not that I could recognize. And Andre had this way of gesturing with his hands when he talked that I'd never seen in anyone from my family or Tamara's family. One time, I was sitting on the porch with my father, who was getting up in years by then, having a little whiskey that he liked after Sunday dinner. He sat there watching the boys playing basketball in the driveway and said something that stuck with me for a long time afterward. "It's funny, Marcus. Your boys don't look a thing like you, do they? Not the face, not the way they carry themselves. They all must have taken after their mama." I laughed awkwardly and agreed with him, but it stung. My own father had noticed it. And if he'd noticed, was it possible other people were noticing too? Was there gossip going around behind my back that I wasn't aware of? But I pushed those thoughts far away from my mind. After all, I loved my children with every fiber of my being. They were my life, my reason for enduring those long trips away from home. I'd arrive back from construction sites, bone-tired and aching, but all it took was seeing their faces light up and hearing them yell, "Daddy's home," for all that pain to disappear. They called me Dad, gave me goodnight hugs and kisses, asked for my advice on everything. That was all that mattered, right? Or at least that's what I tried to convince myself. Deshaun remained a constant presence in all our lives. He was involved in everything. Birthday parties for the kids? Deshaun was there with presents. Holiday gatherings? Deshaun and his wife Valencia always came. Basketball games at school? When I couldn't make it because of work, Deshaun was in the stands cheering. Jasmine's dance recital? Deshaun was there recording it on his video camera. He was present at all the important moments where a father should be. And I, the fool, thought it was beautiful. I believed I had a brother friend who loved my children like they were his own. And they were his own. I just didn't know it yet. There was a time when Malik, already a young man, came home with a bad report card. He'd gotten a D in algebra. I sat him down to talk, to give him that fatherly lecture about the importance of education, but in a way that wouldn't crush his spirit. I was in the middle of explaining why he needed to do better when Deshaun showed up, like he always did. He overheard our conversation and jumped right in, said he could help Malik with his math homework, that he had a knack for teaching it. I thanked him, relieved to have the help. It didn't cross my mind that this wasn't normal behavior. What kind of friend spends hours helping another man's son with homework, unless that son isn't really another man's son at all? Valencia, Deshaun's wife, was a quiet woman, the type who didn't say much but seemed to see everything. She was always a bit distant with me, never one for long conversations. I figured it was just her personality. Maybe she was shy or reserved. But today, I understand that she knew. She knew what her husband was doing while I was away on the road. She knew that the children I was raising and providing for were her husband's biological children. And she swallowed that bitter truth in silence for decades, carrying a pain I can't even begin to imagine. Once, at Terrell's birthday party, I saw something that should have raised red flags. Valencia was staring at Deshaun while he was playing with the kids in the backyard. The look on her face was one of such profound sadness that it squeezed my heart. Her eyes were glistening with unshed tears, but she didn't cry. When I walked over and asked if she was all right, she cleared her throat and said she was just tired, nothing serious. But it wasn't tiredness. It was the crushing weight of a secret that was destroying her from the inside out. It was the agony of knowing her husband had a whole other family, even if it existed within the legal framework of my marriage. The years kept rolling by, and I kept working like my life depended on it. I managed to advance in my career, started earning better money, took on bigger and more prestigious projects. I built us a nice house with 4 bedrooms, a spacious living room, and a big backyard for the kids to play in. I enrolled the children in a good private school, the best one in the area. I bought a newer car, took the family on vacations when I could. I gave my children everything they asked for, within reason, of course. I wanted them to have opportunities I never had, to get a solid education and become successful in life. And they were good kids, never gave me real trouble. They studied hard, helped around the house, showed respect to their elders. I felt like a fulfilled father, like I'd done my job right. But there's one moment I'll never forget. Andre, when he was little, maybe 6 or 7 years old, was staring at Deshaun one day and suddenly blurted out, "Uncle Deshaun, you look just like us." Did you know that? Everyone in the room got uncomfortable. Tamara quickly changed the subject, offered cake, called everyone to the kitchen table. I laughed nervously and didn't give it much thought at the time, But that simple statement from a child echoed in my head for days afterward. He'd seen what I refused to see. He'd noticed a resemblance that I was in complete denial about. Another time, Jasmine came home from school upset. Some girls in her class had been teasing her, saying she didn't look like her daddy. She came crying into my arms, asking if she was adopted. My heart broke into pieces. I pulled her close, wiped away her tears, and told her that she was my daughter, that I'd been there when she was born, that I'd cut her umbilical cord myself, that she was my precious princess. She calmed down and never brought it up again. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Even the kids at school had noticed. Everyone could see it except me, the one person who should have been paying the closest attention. Deshaun even had a key to my house. I'd given it to him myself years ago, thinking I was doing us both a favor, making it easier for him to help tomorrow when I was traveling. He could walk in at any hour, move through the place like he owned it. And in a way, I guess he did. He was more a part of that family than I was. He knew where everything was kept. He knew each child's favorite meal, their schedules, their habits, their dreams. He lived there with them while I was just the man who paid the bills, happy as could be, believing I had a devoted wife and a loyal best friend. There was a period when I tried to travel less and stay home more. I'd taken on some regional projects that allowed me to come home every night to sleep in my own bed. And I noticed something strange during that time. Deshaun started disappearing, little by little. He'd show up less and less, always had excuses for why he couldn't come by the house. I even mentioned it to Tamara, said it seemed odd to me. She brushed it off, said he must be busy with his own life, that it was perfectly normal. But it wasn't normal at all. The truth was that when I was home, he had no space to continue the charade. He couldn't come over and play the role of man of the house, father to my children, husband to my wife. So he stayed away, biding his time, waiting for me to hit the road again. And I always did. I always traveled. It was my job, my responsibility. It was what brought in the money to support that beautiful family I thought was mine. Every time I got in my truck to drive to another job site, I'd look in the rearview mirror and see Tamara waving from the front door, the kids saying goodbye, and my heart would ache with the pain of leaving them. But I consoled myself with the thought that I was doing this for them, that I was sacrificing for their benefit. I didn't know that every time I drove away, it was like I was personally opening the door for Deshaun to walk in and take my place, to step into my role as husband and father. There was one night I'll never forget. I was on the road for work, staying in a cheap motel off Highway 55, the kind of place you crash in when you're working far from home. I woke up around midnight with this terrible feeling in my chest, this anxiety I couldn't explain. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. I called home even though it was late. Tamara answered, her voice thick with sleep. She said everything was fine, told me to rest easy. But I heard something in the background, a sound like someone moving around. I asked what it was. She said it was just the TV she'd forgotten to turn off. I believed her then, but now I wonder, was it really the television, or was it Deshaun slipping out the back door? My children grew up healthy, smart, and beautiful. Malik graduated college and landed a solid job in business. Terrell did well for himself too, got into construction management. Jasmine married a good man and gave me 2 wonderful grandchildren. Andre was finishing up his degree in computer science. I looked at all of that and thought I'd done my job as a father, that I'd fulfilled my purpose, given them love, education, and a strong foundation. They called me Dad with affection and respect. They came to me for guidance. But not one of them had my blood running through their veins. Not a single one carried my DNA. They were all children of the man I called my brother. And life continued in this routine that looked perfect from the outside, but was built entirely on lies. Tamara and Deshawn were living this twisted dance where I was the only one who didn't know the choreography. Until one day fate decided to pull back the curtain and reveal the truth in the cruelest way imaginable. And when that truth came to light, it didn't come alone. It brought with it a pain so massive, it made me question everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and what family really means. When I retired, I thought I'd finally get to enjoy life at home, spend quality time with the family, watch my grandchildren grow up. I'd worked my entire life, spent decades on the road, sleeping in dingy motels, eating truck stop food, far away from everything I held dear. This was supposed to be my time to rest, to be close to my loved ones, to savor every moment. But you know what happened? The more time I spent at home, the more I started noticing things that had gone unnoticed before. Small details that began fitting together like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Deshawn became more distant after I retired. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, just a gradual pulling away. He'd show up maybe once a week instead of almost daily, always with some excuse about being busy, having commitments, not feeling well. Tamara changed too, became more nervous, more withdrawn. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me with this strange expression, like she was carrying a heavy burden on her conscience. When I'd ask if everything was okay, she'd force a smile and say she was just tired, nothing more. But I knew better. One afternoon, I was organizing old papers in the closet, going through documents and photos we'd accumulated over the years. I found an old photograph of Tamara from back when we first started dating. She looked radiant, that beautiful smile lighting up her face. But there was something in that picture that caught my attention. She was wearing a necklace I'd never seen before, a delicate gold chain with a small heart pendant. I showed her the photo and asked about it. She went pale, stammered something about it being a gift from a girlfriend, and quickly changed the subject. But I saw the panic flash in her eyes, and that left me deeply unsettled. I started paying attention to other small things. Things that meant nothing individually, but together painted a disturbing picture. Sometimes I'd come home and smell cigarette smoke in the living room, even though neither Tamara nor I smoked. When I'd ask about it, she'd say it must be drifting in from outside, from a neighbor. Once I found a cigarette butt in an ashtray on the back porch. I'd never smoked in my life. Tamara didn't smoke either, but Deshawn did. He'd always smoked those cheap menthol cigarettes. The children started making comments too, innocent things they'd say without realizing how much they revealed. Terrell mentioned one time that Uncle Deshawn had taken him fishing when he was a kid, on a weekend when I was out of town. But the way he described it was like it was this deeply meaningful memory, something sacred. He talked about the advice Deshawn had given him that day, about what it means to be a man, about navigating life. That cut me deep, because Deshawn was giving fatherly wisdom to my son. Wisdom that should have come from me. Jasmine let slip once, by accident, that when she was a teenager and had gotten into an argument with me about a boyfriend, she'd gone to cry on Uncle Deshawn's shoulder. She said he'd talked her through it, calmed her down, given her perspective. I kept turning that over in my mind for weeks. Why did my daughter seek out Deshawn for comfort instead of her mother? Or instead of waiting for me to come home from my trip? What connection did she feel with him that made her trust him so completely? I noticed Malik had this way of tilting his head when he was deep in thought, and I couldn't figure out who he'd gotten it from until one day Deshawn came by the house, sat down on the porch for a beer, and made that exact same gesture. He tilted his head to the side with that contemplative look, and it was like a light bulb went off in my brain. Malik did that identical movement. And it wasn't just Malik. Terrell had a way of frowning when he was concentrating that was identical to Deshawn's. Jasmine had that same half-smile. Andre gestured with his hands the exact same way Deshawn did when he got excited about something. I became obsessed with these resemblances. I'd spend hours sitting on the porch, drinking my coffee, watching my children when they'd come visit, desperately searching for something of myself in them. Some feature, some mannerism, some characteristic that would say, "This is Marcus's child." But I found nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was like I was a stranger who'd raised somebody else's kids. And the worst part was that I saw that somebody else every week sat across from him at the table, shared drinks with him, called him my brother. One night I couldn't sleep at all. I tossed and turned in bed, my mind burning with thoughts I didn't want to think. Tamara was sleeping beside me, breathing softly. I looked at her and wondered, do I really know this woman? Were all these years of marriage real? Or was it all an elaborate lie? I got up, went to the living room, sat on the couch in the darkness, and for the first time in my life, I let the doubt fully enter my heart. Were my children really mine? But I was terrified of the answer, because if the answer was no, everything I'd built would crumble. My entire life, all my certainties, everything would go up in smoke. So I pushed those thoughts away. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, that my mind was creating problems that didn't exist. After all, why would Tamara do that to me? Why would Deshawn, my childhood friend, my brother in every way that mattered, betray me like this? But the suspicions wouldn't leave. They circled my mind like vultures waiting to feast. And the harder I tried to ignore them, the stronger they grew. I started watching everything more carefully. The way Tamara looked at Deshawn when he came over. The way he spoke to her, with an intimacy that went beyond ordinary friendship. The way my children related to him, with an affection that seemed too deep for just a godfather relationship. There was a Sunday when we had a big family dinner at the house. Everyone was there. Me, Tamara, all 4 children, the sons and daughters-in-law, the grandkids, and of course Deshawn and Valencia. We were gathered around the table eating the meal Tamara had prepared. Fried chicken, collard greens, black-eyed peas, cornbread, everything delicious. Everyone was talking and laughing, and I just sat there observing, watching how Deshawn looked at my children, how he smiled when they told stories, how he jumped into conversations giving opinions and advice like he had every right to. Valencia was there too, quiet as always, eating in silence. At one point our eyes met, and I saw in her expression a sadness so profound it chilled me to the bone. It was as if she was trying to tell me something without words, as if she knew something terrible and wanted to warn me, but couldn't bring herself to speak. After that dinner, I started avoiding Deshawn. I made excuses when he called to hang out. I said I was busy, wasn't feeling well, had other plans. He found it strange, because we'd never been like that before. But I couldn't look at him anymore, without feeling this terrible thing gnawing at my chest, this growing suspicion, this sense that I'd been played for a fool for decades. Tamara noticed I was different. She asked repeatedly what was wrong, if I was sick, if something was bothering me. I told her no, everything was fine, just the weariness of getting old. But she insisted, said she knew me, knew when I was hiding something. I almost told her everything right then and there, almost let all my suspicions pour out. But I held back because putting it into words would make it real. And I still held on to the fragile hope that it was all just my paranoid imagination. The months dragged on, and I withdrew further into myself. I'd spend my days just sitting on the porch, staring at nothing, thinking about life and the choices I'd made. Had I been such a terrible husband? Did Tamara have a reason to betray me? I'd always been hardworking, always brought money home, never raised my hand to her, never disrespected her. What had been missing? Why did she need another man? And Deshawn, my brother, my childhood friend, the man I'd trusted with my life. How did he have the nerve to look me in the eye all those years, sit at my table, eat my food, drink my beer, all while stabbing me in the back? What kind of man does that to his best friend? I was becoming bitter and irritable. The children noticed and worried about me. They'd come to visit, and I'd be withdrawn, always carrying this dark cloud over my head. They'd ask if I was okay, and I'd lie, say I was fine. But I wasn't. I was being eaten alive from the inside, consumed by doubt and resentment. And the worst part was that I didn't have the courage to seek the truth, because deep down, very deep down, I already knew what it was. That's when destiny decided to give me a push in the direction I'd been avoiding. Andre, my youngest, started feeling sick. Extreme fatigue, swelling in his legs, dangerously high blood pressure. We took him to the doctor, and after running tests, the diagnosis came back. Severe kidney disease. He was going to need a transplant. My world shattered into pieces. My youngest son, still so young, needing a kidney to survive. The whole family mobilized immediately to get tested for compatibility. Me, Tamara, his siblings, everyone wanting to help, desperate to save Andre. That's when everything truly started to fall apart. Because those medical tests we took to see if we could donate a kidney ended up revealing something much bigger, something that would destroy not just me, but the entire foundation of our family. And when that phone call came through with the lab technician on the other end, I had no idea that my entire life was about to change forever in a matter of seconds. The days following those tests were the most agonizing of my entire life. It wasn't just the worry about Andre's health, though that alone was breaking my heart into pieces. It was something else, something darker. A terrible feeling I couldn't shake, like I'd asked fate to confirm what I'd been suspecting for so long, but never had the courage to face head-on. Every time the phone rang, my heart would race out of control. I'd stare at it, terrified to answer and hear something that would change everything forever. Tamara was acting even stranger than usual. She who'd always been talkative, always filling the house with conversation, had gone almost completely silent. She'd lock herself in the bedroom or sit in the kitchen staring at the wall like she had 1,000 thoughts racing through her mind. When I'd ask if she was okay, if she was worried about Andre, she'd let out this deep sigh and say yes, it was just concern for our son. But I could see there was something more behind those eyes. There was a fear that went far beyond a mother's natural worry about her sick child. Deshaun disappeared completely, just vanished. From the moment we'd done those medical tests, he gave no sign of life whatsoever. Didn't call, didn't text, didn't stop by the house like he always had. I even mentioned it to Tamara because it seemed so strange to me. Deshaun, who'd always been so present, so concerned about the family, suddenly disappears right when Andre needs support the most. She just shrugged and said he must be dealing with his own issues, that he'd mentioned something about traveling to handle some business. But I wasn't buying it. Deshaun running away right after we'd all done blood tests? That was no coincidence. Nearly 2 weeks crawled by before the phone finally rang. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember it clearly because it was the day I usually took my walk around the neighborhood park. I'd just gotten back home, was taking off my sneakers on the front porch when I heard the phone ringing inside. Tamara answered. I heard her say hello in a trembling voice. Then she went completely silent. All I could hear was her saying, yes, I understand, okay. When she hung up, she came to the porch. She was white as a sheet, all the color drained from her face. She said it was the lab calling, that they needed to speak with me, asked that I come in person because they needed to discuss the test results. My entire world stopped in that moment. Why would they need me to come in person? A simple compatibility test result can be delivered over the phone unless something is very wrong. I went to the lab first thing the next morning. Didn't sleep at all that night. Tamara offered to come with me, but I told her no. I needed to do this alone. The lab was downtown in an older medical building. I climbed those stairs slowly, feeling my legs grow heavier with each step. I announced myself at reception. The woman behind the desk looked at me with an expression of pity and asked me to wait. I sat in one of those plastic chairs in the waiting room, my hands ice cold and sweating. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes, a door opened and a doctor appeared. Middle-aged man in a white coat, holding a folder with an expression far too serious. He called my name and asked me to follow him into his office. That my heart was pounding so hard, I thought it would burst through my chest. I entered that small office with a desk, 2 chairs, a computer, and some diplomas on the wall. The doctor closed the door behind me and gestured for me to sit. He pulled up his chair, placed the folder on the desk, and stared at me for several long seconds. Then he took a deep breath, the way someone does when they have terrible news to deliver and don't know where to begin. He opened the folder, looked at the papers, and looked back at me, and finally spoke in a low, grave voice. "Mr. Washington, I need to discuss the test results with you. This is a very delicate situation." My mouth went completely dry. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't form. I just nodded, giving him permission to continue. He took another deep breath and let it out slowly. "You underwent compatibility testing to potentially donate a kidney to Andre, correct?" I nodded again. He continued carefully. "During our analysis process, we also perform biological relationship verification. It's standard protocol, and I'm very sorry to inform you that the test results show you are not Andre's biological father." The world collapsed around me. It simply collapsed. I'd imagined it, suspected it, feared it. But hearing those words spoken out loud, in plain scientific terms, by a doctor looking at official lab results, it was like taking a sledgehammer to the gut. I couldn't breathe. I gripped the arms of the chair to keep from falling. The doctor watched me with pity in his eyes, waiting for me to process what he'd just said. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to force out the question that had formed in my mind. "And my other 3 children, doctor? Is it possible to check? Are they mine?" My voice came out broken, trembling. The doctor's expression grew even more serious. "Mr. Washington, we have data in our system from all the compatibility tests that were recently performed for the potential donation. Your other 3 children also participated in testing, and I took the liberty of verifying their results as well. I can confirm the findings if you wish." I nodded my head even though I didn't want to hear what was coming. After so many years of suspicion, doubt, and agony, I needed to know the truth, no matter how devastating. The doctor opened another page in the folder and read aloud, each word landing like a hammer blow to my chest. "Malik, Terrell, Jasmine, and Andre. None of them are your biological children. None of them. I'd imagined that maybe Andre wasn't mine. Maybe one of them. But all 4? All 4 children I'd raised, whom I'd loved with everything I had, for whom I'd worked myself to the bone my entire life. None of them were mine biologically. It was impossible. It was insanity." But the doctor kept talking, and what came next was even worse. "There's something else, Mr. Washington. Based on the DNA analysis, all 4 children share the same biological father. It's the same man who fathered all 4 of them. 44 years. More than 4 decades of marriage. 4 children. And every single one of them was fathered by another man. By the same man. I wasn't the father of any of them. And one single man was the biological father of all 4. For decades, while I'd worked like a slave, traveled endlessly, killed myself to provide for my family, that man had been there fathering children with my wife. One child, then another, then one more. 4 times. And I'd raised them all without knowing anything, without suspecting the massive deception. I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper, "Is it possible to identify who the father is?" The doctor shook his head. DNA testing doesn't give us names, only genetic compatibility data. However, if you have a suspicion about someone specific, if you can provide a blood sample or genetic material from that person, we can run a comparison and confirm. And that's when everything clicked into place in my mind. All the pieces of this horrific puzzle came together at once. Deshawn always present. Deshawn with a key to my house. Deshawn taking care of my children when I traveled. Deshawn disappearing right now, when the testing was happening. The physical resemblances I'd noticed over the years. The way my children looked like him and not me. It all made perfect, terrible sense. I looked at the doctor and said with absolute certainty, "I know exactly who the father is. And I'm going to prove it." I walked out of that lab, moving like a zombie. My legs were shaking, my head spinning, my heart feeling like it was going to explode. I got in my car and just sat there gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. 44 years of betrayal. If Malik had been born early in the marriage, it meant the affair had already existed before we even got married. Maybe Tamara was never truly mine at all. I called Deshawn. He answered, sounding surprised since I'd been keeping my distance. I made my voice as steady as I could and said, "Brother, we're getting up in years, you know. How about we both go for a full medical checkup, complete blood work, the whole deal. Take care of our health while we still can." He hesitated for a few seconds, but agreed. I scheduled his appointment for the very next day. That night at home was pure hell. Tamara asked what the doctor had said. I told her it would take a few more days for the complete results to come back, that the lab was running additional verification. She stared at me with those frightened eyes, as if she knew the whole house of cards was about to come crashing down. The next day, I took Deshawn to the lab. He was still somewhat suspicious, but I fed him a story about my doctor recommending it, saying men our age need to be proactive about health. He did the blood test without much resistance. I told him I'd pick up his results later and bring them to him. He agreed and left. As soon as he was gone, I explained the real situation to the doctor and requested they compare Deshawn's DNA with that of my 4 children. 3 days later, the phone rang. "Mr. Washington, we've completed the comparison analysis. Mr. Deshawn Mitchell is confirmed as the biological father of all 4 children. Malik, Terrell, Jasmine, and Andre. All 4 are his biological offspring. There is no margin of error. The compatibility is 99.9% certain." I hung up that phone and broke down completely. I cried like I hadn't cried since my father passed away. I cried from rage, from pain, from the deep humiliation of it all. 44 years of being played for an absolute fool. 44 years of paying every single bill for 4 children, who weren't mine, while the real father got to enjoy all the good parts. Showing up to play, to give advice, to be the cool uncle, while I was just the bank. The idiot who worked like a dog, while another man slept with my wife, and raised his family in my house under my nose. I called Deshawn and told him I needed to see him immediately. He came over. We sat on that same porch where we'd shared so many beers over the decades. But this time, there was no beer, no friendship. There was only the truth, raw and ugly. I looked him dead in the eyes and said it. "I know everything, Deshawn. I know you're the biological father of my 4 children. I had the DNA test done. It's all proven beyond any doubt." He turned absolutely white. He tried to deny it at first. "Marcus, what are you talking about? What kind of crazy accusation is this?" I threw the lab papers right in his face. It's right here in black and white. Malik, Terrell, Jasmine, Andre, all yours. None mine. 99.9% certainty. You are their father, Deshawn. Not me. You. He collapsed right there. His hands started shaking uncontrollably. He tried to speak, but couldn't form words. He just sat there staring at those papers in complete shock. I continued, my voice filled with hatred I'd never felt before. How long, Deshawn? How long have you been sleeping with my wife? How long have you been making a complete fool out of me? He swallowed hard and whispered, voice barely audible. Since before you two got married. I shot up from my chair with the urge to tear him apart with my bare hands. Before? You were with her before I even met her, and yet you introduced her to me? You two planned this whole thing? He raised his trembling hands defensively. It wasn't like that, Marcus. Let me explain. I met her first, yes. We were together. But I was broke, had nothing to offer her. You were an engineer with a real future ahead of you. She chose you for the security, for the money. But we never stopped seeing each other. I loved her. I always loved her. And I loved those kids. But you were their father, too, in every way that mattered. You raised them. You provided everything. I told him to get out. If you don't get out of my sight right now, I won't be responsible for what I do to you. He ran out crying, destroyed, but his pain was nothing compared to mine. I confronted Tamara next. She collapsed to her knees, begging for forgiveness, but there was no forgiveness for 44 years of betrayal. I showed her the DNA tests. All 4 of them, Tamara. Every single one is his. I am the father of none of them. I took my things and left that house of lies that same night. But the hardest part was telling the children. When I showed them the test results, they were devastated. But you know what happened after they processed it. All 4 of them came to me together. Malik spoke for them all. You are our father. Biology doesn't matter. You raised us. You loved us. You were there for us. Deshawn is just biology, but you are our real dad. They chose me. Even knowing the truth, they chose me. And that, in that moment of unbearable pain, was the only thing that kept me standing. They confronted their mother and rejected Deshawn completely. Valencia finally left Deshawn too, taking everything in the divorce. He ended up alone, abandoned by everyone. I divorced Tamara. She lost almost everything and now lives alone in a small apartment. But me? I have my children, my real family. They visit every Sunday. We share meals, laugh, talk about life. They chose me not because of blood, but because of love. And that's worth more than any DNA test could ever measure. Thank you for being here and letting me share my story. If it touched you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment telling me what city and state you're watching from. I love knowing where you all are. If you want to support me even more, there's a donation link in the description. I share real-life stories like this every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular videos will appear on your screen. Choose whichever one calls to you. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over just because someone tried to write the ending without you.